I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Achint Arora is a partner and member of pricing assurance team and assists clients on topics related to price, solution, and contract benchmarking. He has domain expertise in applications and engineering services and co-leads our work in the software licensing space. Amanpreet Machanda is a practice director on the pricing assurance team. He advises clients on inquiries and initiatives related to price benchmarking, contract assessment, and solution design associated with IT application and digital service. Richard Tapadia is a practice director on the pricing assurance team and assists clients on topics related to price benchmarking, solution review, and contract assessment for cloud infrastructure and cybersecurity services. She also leads Everest Group cybersecurity benchmarking offerings. Kunal Verma is a vice president on the pricing assurance team and assists clients on topics related to price benchmarking, solutions review, and contract evaluation for business process services. Kunal's responsibilities include leading Everest Group pricing assessment for digital and transformation projects in business process services. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Achint.
Thank you. If we go on to the if we talk about why we are doing this webinar, I'll try to set the preamble here. For a long time, we have always discussed about pricing, rate card, what's happening on the inflation front. And what we have realized is that over the years, it has been really easy to compare pricing against what the market is doing. It's easy to benchmark. And also the providers, the suppliers understand, right? So what we are seeing is that nowadays this is not about the pricing, because again the environment is such that people are discussing more about pricing has really plateaued because of the whole negative sentiment that has been going on for the last 7-8 months. So what we have seen is that a lot of the bloat that is happening right now in outsourcing deals is now on solution, and that is where enterprises, the buyers, have started focusing on, right? Because pricing is plateauing. Everyone knows that cola waivers, all that kind of things are negotiable, right? And that's what everyone is negotiating on. But in some of the situations, in some of the deals, we are seeing that the solution can often be more than 2x compared to what the market benchmark for equitable parameter would look like. So with that in mind, with that in place, we thought that it's prudent of us to talk about solution sizing as the key parameter that can make or break deals, that can in fact break the budget for the buyer, but also become a fundamental reason for the elimination of suppliers in the outsourcing deal. And from there, we will discuss about what are the different tenets, what are the different elements that are relevant to solution sizing. Before any of that, we'll go to the first topic, which is more about the solution sizing and how is it important. And we'll talk about the enterprise priorities on how we are seeing it in the market right now. So if we talk about the enterprise priorities across, RFX engagements also, Aman, I'll start with you. I'll start with the application services area, right? What is your experience in the most recent proposal review and benchmarking engagement?
Georgian. If I simply look back at the past 3 to 4 months, all mid to large size ADM deals had cost savings as the top mandate, while some deals were about squeezing the incumbents and reallocating the portfolio at lower spend. Many were also focused on genuine vendor consolidation initiatives. As we saw last year, everyone added suppliers to meet the talent needs. As attrition dropped significantly this year, buyers again went after consolidations.
Okay, great. So interesting, right? I mean, so Richa, again, pricing is the number two criteria, right? I mean, it's at 96% of the deals we see that competitive pricing seems to be the criteria. However, in the cybersecurity deals, 100% of the deals are talking about technical expertise. Why do you think is that a preferred criteria for cybersecurity deals?
Yeah. So, Achint, in the last few years, with the rise in remote working, various digitalization initiatives, the attack surfaces have really broadened for enterprises. Cybersecurity is not just a checkbox tick for compliance anymore. They want a robust 360-degree protection from these various sophisticated cyber attacks. Hence, technical expertise is like table stakes for them.
Okay, right. So that's becoming like fundamental part of the solution. Awesome, right? And Kunal, what do you think about BPO services? And you may see the numbers may look very similar to SI services, even though these are two very distinct services. But what's happening on the BPO front?
So if we talk about BPO services, the total cost of ownership or TCO reduction is seen as the number one enterprise objective. Beyond rate cards, enterprises are also seeking favorable contractual terms on COLA, volume discounts, etc. Now, the number two priority is a higher ROI from transformation projects and a balanced transition approach. Solution competitiveness is the number three enterprise priority for BPO services currently. Now, having said that, the enterprises are seen to proactively emphasize on location optimization as a key strategy lever to drive cost savings while maintaining the service quality expectations from the providers.
Okay, great. Right. If we talk about the current environment, as I said earlier, the rates are plateauing, and then CXOs are turning their attention to the reduce the overall commercials. I mean, if you talk about the price and quantity sector, about if you are going to focus on cost optimization, how do you think enterprises are going to target this objective of cost optimization?
Thanks, Sachin. So that's an interesting aspect, right? So if we break the deal commercials into a mathematical equation of price and quantity, right, it's easier to keep a check on rates through benchmarking initiatives. Providers also know that. Hence, for long, the solution value leakage has gone undetected. However, buyers have become smart and now are involving or invoking benchmarking clauses to do end-to-end benchmarking that looks at both solutions and commercials. That's the overall contract value. When evaluating solutions, they are looking at some of the parameters listed on the right-hand side of the page. In fact, in a recent RFP, an incumbent's 2x sizing of its team than its competitors has put it into a dock.
Okay, and in fact, we'll be covering about quantity later, right? Because that's what the whole webinar is all about. It's about solution sizing. Again, Aman, if we think about it, many of our audience may be interested to know what's happening on the pricing, because pricing is always an interesting topic, right? Because that's easily negotiable, but also it's easily defendable at the same point in time. So what do you think is happening to pricing? If you can cover some of that, that will be good to know.
Sure, and I think we can definitely cover that in the next page, right? So primarily, if you look at the past 7 to 8 months, then we have observed muted price increases in the IT application skills. For example, for traditional application skills such as .NET, Java, C, C++, the price increase has been in the range of 0.5 to 1%. Whereas for specialized application skills such as DevOps, AI, ML, NLP, etc., it has been in the range of 1 to 2%. Richa, what pricing trends are we seeing in the cloud and infrastructure skills?
A similar trend, Aman, we've observed a very subdued increase, less than 1.5% for traditional skills like compute, storage, workplace. For some of the premium skills like cloud, containers, threat management, the increase has been higher in the range of 0.5 to 2.5%.
Thanks,
Okay,
Richa.
good to know, right? I mean, this
Kunal?
is Kunal, what are we seeing of BPO?
Yeah, so the trend is largely similar across traditional and domain-intensive BPO skills. However, I just wanted to point out an interesting observation. For traditional BPO skills such as back office operations or even contact center, we even witnessed a slight dip in input-based pricing for US. In the last quarter, a few BPO providers were seen to cross-subsidize location-wise rate cards to align with enterprise price targets. Now, these targets are mostly either shaped by the as-is cost of the enterprise or an incumbent, or even driven by competition. Okay, so while we have talked about the pricing, I would like to highlight that we often talk about the role of alternate commercial models and how it can enable revenues and profitability. However, we don't talk about how solution sizing plays a role in adopting those commercial models. In fact, if we go to the next slide, we believe that the prominent factors motivating providers to practice these alternate impact commercial models are industrialization or verticalization and the mutual benefit they are able to realize by delivering value for the client and in turn benefit their own revenue and margin projections. In fact, the two models, namely output and outcome-based model, has strong solutions capability as the bedrock to the success of these models. If we simply think about it, a successful output-based pricing is based on service providers' ability to achieve optimized solution effort ratios, while the outcome-based pricing model has its upsides and downsides designed on the success of the solution estimation capability. As providers strive to be a true business partners to the enterprises, it is imperative that service providers get their solutioning right to mutually benefit from the implementation of these impact commercial models. With that, let's discuss about the key elements that characterize winning solutions across the three service areas. The next page. Yeah, so an interesting observation propped up from a survey that we took with the European-based executives towards the end of the last year. An interesting finding, 68% of the respondents selected leading with pre-configured industry standard solutions as the preferred transformation approach. Conversely, only 32% of the respondents selected co-creation of transformation solution along with the enterprise as the preferred transformation solutioning approach, thereby dropping by about 9% vis-a-vis 21 levels. So what's the bottom line? The bottom line is the enterprises are emphasizing a lower time to value, a higher ROI, and a lower payback period from transformation solutions. This is attributed to and on the backdrop of enterprise and also on account of competing providers offering numerous pre-configured high turnkey industry standard solutions. Now, as the business uncertainty lurks on through the remainder of 2023 and possibly beyond, we do anticipate the acceptance of pre-configured industry standard solutions to increase further. With that, we have something interesting for you. We have a poll.
Okay, poll time.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so for our audience, the question is, how much do you think is the typical productivity passed on through pre-configured solutions in system integration implementation projects? There are 5 options. One, reduction less than 10%. The second one, reduction of 10 to 19%. The third one, reduction of 20 to 34%. The fourth one, reduction of 35 to 49%. And finally, a reduction of 50% plus. We will keep the poll open for about 45 seconds. Now you can provide us with your answer. Okay. So it looks like 46% has participated till now. So we have the results in front of us, quite an interesting set of numbers. So Achin, based on the results, what do you interpret of it?
I think if we think about the audience opinion, they are fairly distributed between 10 to 19% and 20 to 34%. I think we have a very intelligent audience here today, right? Because the number that they have picked up, the highest proportion, is the right number. What we have seen in deals, right? In outsourcing deals, that pre-configured solution can deliver up to 20 to 35%, 34% in terms of, productivity compared to a full manual effort. So kudos to those who picked that, and kudos to the entire audience that participated in this poll, right? If we talk about next, right, we always keep discussing about what's next gen. What's happening in this space, what's happening in that space, what's happening in the ADM infrastructure, BPO services side of things. So with that in mind, what we'll do is we'll talk about what's happening in different engagements, what's going on. I'll first speak about the ADM deal. Aman, what is your perspective on the recent engagement? What's happening in ADM space?
Well, Achint, if I look at the change in terms of the way deals are being solutioned or authored by providers, some of the themes that are consistently coming up are first, agile or pure play DevSecOps model, where buyers buy a large capacity of resources and expect them to be persistent through this delivery. During this time, they expect the providers to deliver higher velocity on account of consistency, familiarity with the landscape, and higher technology adoption. Second, given automation became table stakes over the years, a lot of new deals are at a minimum talking about a digital command center as a level zero, where all these self-service, self-heal, and narrow AI solutions are deployed. We have also started coming across mention of generative AI solutions in the solution response. Now, talking about Gen AI, Achin, any color would you like to add?
Okay, I think even if I would have not added about it, someone would have asked, right? That what's happening because of generative AI. Again, what we need to understand is that even today, these are initial days, right? Let's be honest about it. Which means that whatever generative AI in many of the outsourcing deals we see is an AI washing and nothing more, right? People are still focusing on the narrow AI solution, talking about machine learning, all this kind of stuff, and positioning it as generative AI, right? Uh, what we need to understand, however, is that not everything is doom and gloom. We are actually seeing now generative AI being passed on in terms of productivity, and I'll talk about it. What it is. So what we did is we did some of the recent deals where generative AI actually made presence felt. We saw that providers who were proposing it, generative AI solution, the kind of productivity that they can deliver because of the embedded AI or any deployable AI, they were passing on additional 10 to 12% productivity compared to their non-generative AI counterparts. So if provider A, if they were proposing generative AI, they were proposing 10 to 12% higher than non-generative. What we believe is that this is the current impact. Has it been realized? No, right? But if you go back to 2015 to 2017, when automation made its presence felt in outsourcing deals, even at that time, no provider was actually, implementing it at scale. They were basically starting in 2015, but they started off passing off that productivity. We are seeing, and we believe that the same thing is happening right now in generative AI, that people yet don't have the use cases to be deployed at scale, but they have already started passing on the productivity and they're starting off conservative, right? So 10 to 12% is not the real potential about of generative AI. It's gonna be a lot more higher. Only thing is that they are starting off low, they'll implement the use cases, and they'll then scale it up. This is support. For development, it's a different story, right? A much higher productivity that are being showcased. For testing, in fact, some surprisingly in some of the deals we saw the highest of all, right? More than even coding, right? So different phases, but more or less we are seeing at least 20 to 30% may be the end use case. For areas like command center, maybe even 70, 75%, who knows, right? So that's what's happening on the generative AI front. The productivities have started getting floated into the outsourcing deal, right? Okay. Now,
Okay.
Aman, what do you think about the SI space?
Yeah. Um, all right. I think if you're talking about the SI space, right, for long, the SI space was stuck in old ways. That is, deliverable based milestone payments and approaching all implementations as technical upgrades, right? However, as we see more providers becoming full breadth partners, that is providing end-to-end advisory to support services, we are seeing more skin in the game and also higher upsides being allowed by the buyers, right? So innovative pricing models are becoming a feature of the SI services where all types of P&L improvement metrics are being looked at. Also,
Okay.
providers no more pitch platforms as a technical solution to the client problem statement, but are looking at how a particular platform fits into the business stack of the enterprise.
Okay.
Ashwin, do you
So,
want to add on to it?
which means, you know, that not only is a implementation of new solution, but also, that a lot of duplicate solutions are being retired, the functionality is being replaced, more hosting done on cloud, effectively reducing the technical footprint, the cost on infrastructure services. All of that is going hand in hand, right? So I think, in my opinion, additionally, a lot of providers who are basically winning this game, the SI game, they are also bringing in their consultative layer. That consultative layer may do a lot of process re-engineering. That consultative layer may do a lot of, experience design remapping. That consultative layer may do a lot of strategic consulting or change management, all that kind of stuff. Those are the winning themes for any kind of new age SI transformation deal. And that is where most of the providers who are winning the big deals are differentiating compared to those who are not. Okay, another area, Richa, cybersecurity. What do you think is happening in deals and how is it impacting the way that solutions are being designed for cybersecurity deals?
Right. So, Achint, in the cybersecurity space, there's been a very high focus on comprehensive threat management. We are seeing an emergence of various new age innovative offerings around detection and response. There are various MDR and XDR offerings in the market. Another shift we are observing is that a lot of providers are partnering with tech providers to co-develop solutions. Just an example, if you look at SASE or Secure Access Service Edge, most of the providers that have launched this offering have done so in partnership with the tech provider. And lastly, while threat prevention is still a big focus area, and increasing enterprise interest have been observed in incident response and recovery space as well. Yeah, so these have been some of the recent trends in the security market.
All right. Thanks, Richa. This is interesting, right? And how do you think that things are changing in the cloud managed services space?
Well, if we talk about cloud, there's been a lot of interest in deriving value out of the cloud investments that have been made. So, industry contextualized solutions, effective FinOps approach, predictive analytics are some of the levers that are being used by the service providers to achieve this. Another interesting aspect has been that there's been a shift from fixed fee pricing model. We have been seeing various flexible and innovative pricing models being proposed in deals, depending upon the cloud consumption pattern of the client.
Okay. Okay. Again, thanks. This is really helpful, and good to know. After talking a lot about IT services, ADM, SI, infra, just cloud and cybersecurity, let's switch gears and now go to BPO. Kunal, can you throw some light on how things are changing in the BPO services market?
The engagement model itself has now moved to managed services. The emphasis is on value creation that includes cost reduction, process efficiency, transformation benefits, and service quality. Let's talk about transition. We are witnessing service providers adopting a consultative approach by partnering with enterprises on transformation projects even before taking on the BPO scope of work. It could be done through sole source deals, and hence they are deviating from the typical lift and shift strategy. Further, the business impact in best-in-class engagements that we see goes beyond the typical cost commitments and includes business metric enhancements. So, for example, if we talk about order to cash, we are talking about DSO reduction. Let's take another example, supply chain. There are commitments on inventory turnover optimization. In multiple functional deals, global deals, synergies across the functional areas could make or break the deal. Because in a boilerplate solution, we are seeing more of a siloed effort estimation model, whereas in the next-gen principles that the service providers are adopting, they are packaging functions into as-a-service commercial models. So, for example, finance as a service, contact center as a service. In addition, we observe innovative and commercially engaging models that hold the service provider accountable for operational and business impact project outcomes. So nowadays, the enterprises are not considering any deferred cost or upfront discounts or bonuses as a part of the innovative, commercially engaging model. Let us now take a BPO-specific example of how provider solution is delinking their fee from the underlying effort and offsetting the inflationary pressures for themselves and for their clients. Okay, so here we have taken an example from the finance and accounting side. The common expectations from the enterprises are that one, would there be continuous improvement in the year-on-year volumes that the service providers are managing? So, for example, if the service provider is managing 100,000 volumes of invoices in year one, would that increase in year two and beyond? The second expectation is that how does your pricing model reduce the cost outlay factoring in for inflation / COLA and even the service provider staffing pyramid bulging? The third expectation is de-risking themselves from the operational monitoring and underlying operational risks such as attrition, etc. Now, given these concerns, a digital and process transformation-led solution coupled with an output-based pricing model or a transaction-based pricing model in market parlance for billing the core business process services is observed to meet all the three expectations that I outlined if implemented successfully. So if you look at this graph, we are talking about year one cost of 100. That's an index that we have shown to you. And it is going down to 65.3. So a net benefit of about 35% during the contract term of 5 years through various initiatives. It could be operational efficiency. It could be based on digital transformation and analytics. Plus, as the generative AI kicks in and certain BPO services such as marketing and sales, contact center, etc., we believe that the cost per invoice or a cost per call would reduce much further than the 35% that we are showing here.
Okay, great. And Kunal, if I just chip in here, I think a very similar trend in terms of the plateauing we are seeing. Again, something different in, let's say, an AMS ticketing side of things. In a single deal, this kind of a trend is happening. What I would like to add is that even in apps or cybersecurity or cloud infrastructure services, we have seen that plateauing again happening. In some cases, it's even going up, right? Because the automation solutions for those engagements where they were already deployed many years ago and they have been basically saturated, for those engagements, the next level of disruption can come only from generative AI or equivalent solutions, right? We're talking about observability in application services area, especially on the support side, but those things have been there for quite some time, right? So the additional benefit can come through, doing a lot of generative AI and actually scaling it up clearly, right? So really helpful on this one. I think trends are very similar across app, BPO, and infra services when it comes to the implementation of solutions and how the productivity is going on, right? Uh, our next one is an offer for all the executives and senior leaders. In case you are interested and you want to get a complimentary benchmark for any of the three metrics within these areas, right? Which is basically EMS for cloud ERP apps, SAP RISE-FW, which basically means report interfaces, conversion, enhancement form workflows. Any one of these are RISE-FW. Anything in finance, accounting, banking, insurance, BPO services, which is basically a verticalized service benchmark, cybersecurity managed services, or cloud. Any one of the areas out of these 6 listed one, we can provide you a complimentary benchmark, and that this offer is only for the senior executive, right? So you can reach out to either the 4 of us who are part of this webinar today, right? And we'll come back to you. This is our complimentary offer on the solution sizing. Now next, we talk about what needs to be in place for the impactful and sharp solution sizing. And this is a really important topic. Reason being that, come what may, we already talked about that we have seen situation where, solution was 2x of the baseline solution, baseline market solution. And there can be 100 reasons for it, that the client is less mature, we need a lot more time, there's a lot of complexity, all of it is understandable. But that can be the reason for eliminations clearly for many of the suppliers, and that's why it's important that you need to have the right parameters in there for impactful and sharp solution sizing. And with that, Richa, what do you think are the important characteristics of an environment that is conducive to a good solution?
Sure, Achin. Yes, as you rightly mentioned, there are certain essential components that need to be in place to foster an impactful and sharp solution. We've listed those down on this page. Let us delve into some of these factors. Well, the most important is having a well-defined scope. It is essential because without this, in the long run, there could be a lot of unpredictable change requests that could inflate the overall cost. So a good solution needs to be scoped on point with clear and definitive terms with regards to both expenses and the overall timeline. Having trust between both the parties, supplier and provider, supplier and buyer, is of utmost important as well. So it is important. So when a supplier has some bit of experience in doing similar engagements, it instills confidence in terms of the risk and contingencies that are baked in the solution. In a similar fashion, if the buyer is more acceptable of the service provider margins, it enables a frictionless engagement. Yeah, so these are some of the essential critical elements which enable a win-win situation for both the parties. Okay, now let us look at some of the important factors that affect the effort sizing. So if you move to the next page, so Aman, looking at an SI implementation deal, what do you think are the critical factors?
Thanks, Richa. As we have highlighted earlier, pricing is just one part of the TCP equation. Any deal pricing gets impacted by the solution one goes ahead with, right? Now, there are many areas where we have seen service providers not having a laser sharp focus while sizing up a deal, and hence it can often lead to under solutioning or over solutioning. For example, for an ADM deal, many a times providers will not cater to the onshore delivery requirements outlined in the RFP, and it often leads to lower FTEs estimated. Similarly, it is important to assess the stringency of service levels, and basis that providers should bake in the right SLA delivery contingency in their solution. Another example that I can think of is if we talk about provider expertise and incumbency, especially in AMSGs, right? Many a times providers will use that to their advantage, and and during renewals they will have a very competitive fee, right? Because given that a certain provider is an incumbent, they would have the understanding about the application landscape, right? And they would tend to go with lower average effort but tickets in their deals, right? So this is something that we see providers using their using these parameters to their advantage to size up the effort, right? Now, for any SI transformation deal, having an effective change management strategy is increasingly becoming a part of contemporary contracts. Equally, it is important to define the level of client involvement in such projects to drive the changes and adoption of new processes. So the point that we are trying to drive home is that depending on the deal context, the deal solution architect should price size accordingly.
Right.
All right.
I'll chip in, right? I mean, additionally, if you just think about, things like industry experience and repeatability, it goes back to the SR pre-configured solution we talked about. That's very important. Then I think one of the most important parameters and one of the overlooked, underappreciated, but can significantly impact commercial parameters, the client involvement. We have seen in deals where, client is sought with a lot of higher effort in terms of the client involvement. The client later say that I don't have the bandwidth to get involved. And that basically significantly uplifts the effort that required from the supplier. At least on the SI transformation side, that really, really happens all the time, right? In terms of delivery constraint, we are working on a deal right now. These providers are very gung-ho about, okay, we can offshore everything. The client says they never asked me. They can't offshore anything. What do? Right? That significantly not only takes your costs up, but also the effort, right? Because the productivities are really different for each of the countries that are part of the scope. A US would have a different kind of number of productivity hours. India would have different. Every country has a different kind of a situation, right? And that really needs to be incorporated into your solution. Service level. Do you need a senior team to have deliver very stringent SLAs? Yes, you do, right? So you cannot have the same solution that you are taking for an 80-85% kind of a service availability or your incident response time to with that, where the resolution times are being asked with the stringency of 98% adherence, right? You need to have a senior team to deliver it. Lastly, implementation methodology. Again, do it in Agile, do it in Waterfall, do it in mix of both. it can be a very, very different effort. And let me break the news to you that in Agile, the effort required is actually more for the same scope of work, which you may start with, right? So it's a very different kind of a methodology. We talk about Agile that we can change things, we can do anything, but it also kind of, work in a very different format. And lastly, the tools and accelerators. You can have all the third-party tools in there, but if you're not actually deploying the kind of productivity that you pass are really different. So I think I wanted to add all of it as part of the color that any solution can get impacted. All these parameters in sub shape and form impact your deal commercial. And we have seen that the deal commercial for the same set of parameters that were listed out initially as part of the RFP, as part of the sole source requirement, they can be, X, 6, and can go up to 6X, 7X, whatever, right? I mean, that amount can really change. And sometimes, and that also becomes part of the solution bloat, which is you didn't get the requirement really properly as suppliers from the buyers, and effectively ended up doing a lot of solution bloat or ended up undersizing significantly. So with that in mind, I'll pass it back to you, Aman.
Thanks, Sachin. All of these points are very interesting, right? And we see providers, using all of these parameters to size up the effort accordingly, right? So, all right, I think it's time for the next poll, right? So, we can open a poll for our audience. So we would want to, ask, in your experience, how much efficiency do you think providers typically pass in cloud managed services deals? So is it 5 to 10%? Is it 11 to 20%? Is it 21 to 40%? Or is it more than 50%, right? Okay, so our initial participation levels suggest somewhere around 21 to 40%. Let's keep the poll open for next 20 seconds. All right, I think we have the results with us. So primarily, majority is around 21 to 40%. Richa, how do you feel about the result? Is it surprising?
Actually, no, Aman, as Ajin mentioned, our audiences are very intelligent. And in fact, for most second generation, third generation outsourcers, we see the improvement in the range of 21 to 40%. If we move to the next page, right. So our analysis also suggests that the quality or the volume of the impact, the quantity or the volume of the impact will differ based on the maturity of the outsourced environment. So for a first gen outsourcer, the impact of staffing pyramid, automation, clarity of scope, and so on could be really high, going up in the range of 38 to 52%. Talking about second generation and third generation outsourcers, this could be in the range of 24 to 34%. So over a 5-year period. So the result is not very surprising. However, generative AI is promisingly the next level of disruption that the market is observing. So it'll be interesting to see how that impacts the overall pricing. Now let's move on to BPO engagements. Kunal, what kind of impact are you observing in the market?
Yeah, so it is similar to the cloud and infra services. The impact of various solution elements vary based on the generation of outsourcing. Now, a biggest takeaway from our recent contract benchmarking project is that the impact of the solution design could range anywhere between 10 to 20%, even in a third generation outsourcing deal. So if we look at the various solution elements that could shape up the overall solution design of BPO services and consequently have an impact or a bearing on the pricing. So availability of a defined RACI matrix and historical volumes, right? We talked about enterprises and providers moving into an output-based pricing model, even outcome-based pricing model. Now, in first generation outsourcing, the impact of the availability of a defined RACI matrix could be as high as 7 to 10%. Interestingly, I was working on a strategic engagement review, which is basically a contract review, wherein the provider, after 4 to 5 years, wasn't still definite about the scope of services that they signed for, because there was a lot of to and fro in the enterprise environment, a lot of acquisitions that have happened, and the boundary of the scope of services became more and more diffused. And they had to staff a lot of bench and buffer resources to get to the SLA KPI commitments that they signed for. Now, having said that, in second generation and third generation outsourcing, the impact of RACI matrix and historical volumes to price reduces, given the availability of a defined RACI matrix and historical volumes. The second one is the level of process maturity. While 21 to 40% is the level that we see in various BPO services as a productivity number, a lot of it really depends upon how mature the process is, right? And in one of the engagements that I was involved in, the enterprise didn't even allow the service providers to bring on their own BPO resources. And herein we are talking about accounts payable, right? Which is a much simpler function compared to, let's say, FP&A or a financial crime. We are talking about a high-tech client here, and the enterprise screened the resources that they had to staff on that project. For record to report, the staffing pyramid really became very bulky. We are talking about people who have about 4 to 7 years of experience as the junior most resources doing general accounting, right? So again, a lot of it really depends upon the enterprise appetite to risk and how mature the process is, because if the process is not at all mature, to achieve those SLAs and KPIs, you need to staff more senior folks, which could really bulk up your pricing. We have seen deals wherein the winner wasn't the lowest bidder, and it really amounted to the provider who understands the overall risk profile of that project and how it compares to the as-is baseline as well. We have seen situations wherein the enterprise had about 500 people to start with, and they were operating with 500 people, and there were bids who were all over the place. We are talking about bids, solutioning about 250 people. Then there were bids who were solutioning 700, 750 people. All of this really shapes up your pricing and deviates your overall fees compared to the as-is baseline. So if we talk about the level of process maturity, in a first-gen outsourcing, the impact to price is the highest, whereas in second generation and third generation outsourcing, the impact of this particular solution element reduces. The third is the SLA KPI expectations, right? In a first generation outsourcing, the enterprise may not be that stringent on SLA and KPIs, which means that the providers could get away signing a bit leaner SLA KPIs. The targets could be a bit on the leaner side. So the impact to price is at the moderate level in first generation outsourcing. But if we go towards the second generation outsourcing and third generation outsourcing deal, herein you are talking about more stringent SLAs, and in part it could also be because of the numerous benchmarking exercises that these enterprises would have done with third-party advisors and benchmarkers. Now, talking about sizing and operational metrics such as number of productive hours, concurrency, utilization, buffers, every service provider has a different level of productive hours, concurrency, and buffers that they would like to take. Most of it is influenced by recent experiences and projects, whether the project was a success or was it an operational failure. Plus, the culture of the company could also decide, how much productive hours would be expended by an FT per annum. So in a first generation outsourcing, the impact of these metrics is the highest because the baseline may not be as efficient as the provider could achieve through their own solution and operational model. In second generation and third generation outsourcing, we do see service providers coming up with innovative ways to ensure that their operational levels are better than these other incumbents or other competition to win the business, because these could really swing the needle and impact the pricing. Staffing pyramids is self-explanatory. In first-gen outsourcing, the impact is the highest because there's more flexibility for the providers to choose their band mix and managed services deal. Whereas in second-generation outsourcing, third-generation outsourcing, a lot of it really depends upon what is the band mix that the incumbent has currently. When we talk about the digital-led productivity, we have been talking about digital transformation, operational efficiency, etc., Lean Six Sigma. The impact to price is the highest in first-generation outsourcing because you have so many projects that could be delivered, and those could add a lot of value to the enterprise. Whereas in a second-generation, third-generation outsourcing, some of those low-hanging fruits could already be plugged by the incumbent, and those projects may not yield a lot of value. So the new providers will have to come up with innovative ways or newer projects to provide more productivity benefits in terms of the FTE reduction or cost reductions. Now, if you look at the location effort sizing, and you can see, the Harvey balls are colored, fully. Even in third generation outsourcing deal, we are seeing service providers bringing, a new set of locations. So for example, if we are talking about India, we are seeing Vijayawada, we are seeing Vishakhapatnam, we are seeing Indore, Bhopal, Lucknow, Mangalore into the mix, which used to be, cities like, service providers used to deploy Pune, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Jaipur, perhaps previously. So a lot of new locations are coming up, and enterprises are proactively emphasizing moving to newer locations to, bridge the cost concerns that are currently gripping them. So in a nutshell, the solution elements can swing the pricing by 10 to 30%, depending upon whether it's a first generation deal, second generation, or a third generation deal. Much of the impact is driven by incorporating optimal sizing metrics such as productive hours, concurrency, buffers, best-in-class transformation productivity range. We get a lot of inquiries from enterprises and service providers. Hey, what is the productivity that you are seeing in the market in voice contact center or supply chain, F&A, etc.? And location sizing. Are you seeing more of work from home deployment? What type of cities are my peers deploying in RFPs or sole source bid? Just to ensure that they are there abreast of all the happenings on the ground. So just concluding on this slide, we anticipate the service providers developing capabilities in the AI/ML space to be a key differentiator in solution sizing and consequently the price impact in times to come. Okay, moving on to the next page. Achint, before we close, we saw a lot being covered around SI, infra, cybersec, and BPO space. As we approach the end, I was interested to hear, how does effort vary in ERP implementations?
And Kunal, before I jump onto this, one of the audience members has asked a question around what does first generation, second generation, third generation outsourcing mean. I'll first answer that, and then I'll come to this one. To think about it, a third generation outsourcer will be an enterprise or a buyer who has done outsourcing multiple times, already have implemented all the SOP automation solution, fairly well offshored with respect to the location strategy. So think about a very mature buyer who has been very comfortable doing a lot of managed services for years now. Whereas the first generation outsourcer may have worked with a lot of outsourcing providers for long, but they still prefer to do a lot of work in a staff augmentation way, keeping a fair mix of in-house and outsourced resources, having a lot of control over the services, and then location strategy is also more onshore heavy. So that's the difference between a first generation and a third generation outsourcer, and that's the continuum. Right now, we are in a place where we are not talking about fourth generation outsourcing providers, right? So those generative AI, those experimenting with those kind of applications with the outsourcing provider, right? Even a first generation outsourcer can experiment with all the generative AI solutions. They can be really mature, right? But it's also about working with an outsourcing provider, where we look at the generations of outsourcing standpoint, right? So answering that part of the question, and now jumping back to your question, Kunal, which is about what difference do we see in the ERP implementation phase, right? So as you can see, the implementation size within ERP for the same platform, for the same set of parameters that have been listed out, can vary between 3 to 4x compared to the base solution. The one on the low, the one on the high, that's almost like a 4x solution difference. No, that impact based on the parameters that we discussed previously around change management approach, around involvement of the consultative layer, around involvement of the client in the solution, and then of course the estimation guidelines, right? We know for a fact that different service providers are at different places in their adoption of, accelerators, in their adoption of framework, the way they propose in deals, right? They are at a very different place. Some have been doing for years, some just started, and that's why we see that some of the most pricier providers also end up, from an overall cost perspective, end up being competitive because they are, really good at the solution part of things. And that's what the whole game, that's what the game lies in, right? What we know is that based on our database on the solution sizing in the SAP S/4HANA space, Oracle Fusion, Salesforce, multiple other ERP platforms, you know, the control over the solution sizing, the control over the industrialization, the control over the levers itself can make this difference in terms of the effort, but also become the real factor in basically in elimination. In fact, there is a recent deal that we were just talking about, just some time ago, and in that, the provider who was almost like 2x in terms of pricing, but their solution was so optimized that they were not coming out more than 30 or 40% than the other providers, right? And they ended up winning the deal. So it's amazing, right? I mean, the solutions I think can make a real impact into winning and losing deals, and between financially viable and non-viable deals. In fact, a lot of the C3 spend is being questioned nowadays because of that. And our recommendation to all the audiences, you need to have a real look onto your solution sizing, because pricing is easy, right? And let's be honest, right? Providers can go really low on the pricing, the rate cards. They can go really low, and that may give you an artificial, accomplishment feeling that you got the lowest rate cards as buyers. But in reality, they can really give such a solution bloat that they will earn millions and millions and millions of dollars from you, right? From buyers. So that's very important to have. And for the suppliers, solution sizing make more sense because you need to be competitive in the market, right? And the whole point is that the whole uh, outsourcing relationships are based on trust. So it's very important to have the right sizing in there, the right pricing in there, and charge for a fair and equitable fee around that. With that in place, we are now towards the end of this session, and we will have the floor open to questions. We'll answer those questions. What I'll do is I'll moderate some of these questions which we receive from our audience, and we can start answering those. I'll start first on one of the GBS related question that we received, and this which I'll ask you to chip in here. Again, what do you think GBSs should do to transition from FTE pricing to transaction-based pricing?
Right. So Achin, transition from an FT-based pricing to transaction-based pricing will have the same underlying principles as any outsourced operations, wherein they would need a strong baseline and standardization as a prerequisite. Um, However, for GBS, the fee per transaction should be a function of their internal cost structures, in-house FT versus outsourced within GBS, their transfer pricing, tax structures, etc. Net, they need to be competitive against comparable outsourced services. It is additionally important to have clean records of short range and long range historical data such as ticket dump, SLA requirements, etc. So basis the evaluation of these parameters, a shift to transaction or RU-based pricing can be made. Lastly, I would like to add that just like how outsourced parties do it, it makes more sense to start that type of work in support, contact center operations type of work, which are more commoditized in nature.
Okay, thank you. My next question is directed towards Kunal. Okay, Kunal, is there an appetite from the buyers to see some sort of, innovation line item and in the budget to, particularly guarantee towards ongoing consulting, towards ongoing continuous improvement initiative?
Yeah. So buyers side check for innovation, and in fact, from a service provider perspective, it's a differentiator. Now, service providers are seen to partner with buyers on areas of, let's say, talent mobility, career transition services, global mobility, and even for the outsourced scope of work, the procurement and the RFX strategy. That said, the buyers are seeking innovative commercial ways to pay for ongoing consulting services, such as linking to satisfaction scores, success-based milestones. Also, as we covered during the webinar, buyers do seek a clarity on the projected ROI from consulting projects before signing up for them. Now, in this regard, the case studies, references play a significant part to communicate the expected benefits for the buyer based on previous engagements delivered by the provider for other clients.
Right. Thanks, Kunal. I'll ask one last question, and this will be directed towards Aman. So, Aman, any significant differences in the outsourcing deal structures between Europe and Americas?
Sure, Arjun. So, we typically observe higher offshoring for North American deals as compared to European deals. In fact, within Europe, right, there are mature outsourcing locations such as, Germany, Netherlands, in the Western Europe market, where we have seen enterprises, going with aggressive offshoring. However, within Southern Europe, countries such as Italy and Spain, we have seen enterprises, going with a slightly conservative view towards offshoring, right? And there are reasons to it, right? There are challenges around, historical negative perceptions, language barriers, and buyer concerns around data privacy and security. Also, because of these reasons, providers tend to go with a higher governance for, these non-mature locations, and there would be, FTEs loaded for additional PMO, architect level governance and compliance roles at onshore or nearshore locations, right? And this is primarily for cultural alignment. Moreover, few IPPs, they're also observed to subcontract in locations such as Spain when participating in large deals. So net, these are some of the, levers through which, some of the service providers change their solution sizing for Europe market as compared to the Americas market.
All right. I think we are at the top of the hour, so we are done.